I'm really glad that we're out here today on this section of the Little PeeDee River, just looking out in the water and seeing, you know, the water itself is just so beautiful with that black coloring, like they call black tea, right?
Right. Tannic.
So, tannic, yep. And this is just a really beautiful area. Close by, there's the convergence of the Little PeeDee into the Great PeeDee. Culturally, for the Native Americans in this area, you know, that have had history here and so much activity up and down the Little PeeDee River, there was trade that was established well over 300 years ago. So this river actually was that access for the tribes of the PeeDee and the Waccamaw, traveling, bringing deer skin, and it's understood that they actually were the guides to help navigate the river, as we know that when you're here on this river, there's a lot of oxbows and areas that you could get lost. I mean, you're the river keeper, so you're going to know all about that.
Right. Getting lost on the river can be easy, for sure, especially on the Little PeeDee. There's so many tiny little creeks and tributaries and whatnot, especially when the trees are in bloom and the cypress leaves are everywhere. Canopy can get kind of thick, and it can be very easy to get lost, but like you said, it's been navigated for hundreds of years, and even today, you know, I'm a native from this area. I've lived here my entire life in this area, and one thing I know is there's not always a lot of stuff to do in this area, so this river is kind of the recreation point for most of the young people growing up, you know, all races, all creeds, all background. It doesn't matter where you're from, people are always coming here, fishing with Grandpa, kayaking, just sitting on the banks of the river and just enjoying themselves. It's a free, simple option. Don't have to go far, don't need money to enjoy this beautiful nature and this beautiful river. So in some ways that hasn't changed. This river is still very much one that is used every day, every year by people of all generations. You
know, it's kind of an interesting thing when I was speaking with my mother's cousin, and he grew up with his grandfather, my great-grandfather, and he shared the stories of that being such a meaningful part of him with his grandfather, getting out and fishing not too far from here. From what I understand, that was one of their places to get in the water and just fish. So, you know, a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a testament to how this river is very hard to stay away from. It's a great river. It's beautiful. Like you said, the tannic water. Specifically, you mentioned the part about how the rivers meet, where there used to be an outpost there, a trading route. Even now, it's still a beautiful sight. The Great PeeDee River looks kind of like chocolate milk. It's very muddy. It's very dark, as opposed to the sweet tea water that we have on the Little PeeDee. But when they mix, it is a beautiful sight. All in that area down there, Woodbury, very bottom of Marion County. The neck, as they call it in Marion County.
And there's a lot of land in the PeeDee, Little PeeDee River Basin. The area, I know, it's high designation for conservation, you know, high priority. So I'm happy to see that we have some, like Woodbury Wildlife Management Area and the Heritage Reserve, and that's protecting a large amount of the land. And I think the greatest concern I have is that that will change somehow, because as we've seen that happen with development coming in, that it changes the landscape. And this isn't something that is just happening or just started. Doing a lot of historical research about the Little PeeDee River in this area, and my ancestors being from here, I found that there were, even back a couple hundred years ago, as the concept of plantations were important for this region, actually started about the mid-1700s. They were already petitioning to dredge and fill swamplands, and you know, the goal was to build on plantations and to have, you know, wealth, but they changed so much about the area even back then. So I guess the concern that I have is that it will continue on and we'll have so much loss. And it's not just the loss of the, you know, the environmental impacts to that loss, but it's the cultural impacts. Because with that disconnecting and that loss of connectivity, it actually creates a loss of community connectiveness. And we can just look back in history and see how that has happened And it's, why do we want to repeat that history? So we need to really focus on protecting the conservation areas that exist. And it would really be great if we could have that 64 miles that it's been eligible for scenic river status to become scenic river. It's this gap in that area of the little PeeDee for some reason that just didn't make it, and it's certainly eligible. So I would really like to see that happen, and hopefully that will be one of the outcomes of this nomination for a most endangered river. And I know you can talk more about some of the issues with water quality, with doing some of the testing that you've done as a river keeper.
Yeah, sure, of course. When you have impacts from development, you're going to have increased flooding. You're also going to have an increase in human population along the river, which isn't a bad thing. Of course, people love to enjoy the river. As you can see, it's a beautiful place to live. Where we are right now, it's a beautiful spot right here on the Little PeeDee River. But at the same time, things have to be done in a good way. They have to be done in a responsible way. And more development means a lot of times that good practices get overlooked at the expense of cheaper development and quicker development. And that's a real issue. Like you said, it's a loss of community, not only because of how that can harm our water quality, our drinking water, and our sites of recreation on the river, but also because as flooding increases, people get driven out, people leave, they go other places, and we lose the community that's been built here over, like you said, 300 years, or whoever's been here that long, or whoever's new. They're all welcome, and they all love the river. So it is a real impact.
Yeah, definitely. And we do want to think about the things that need to be done for protecting the river, and particularly when it comes to the contaminants that end up being deposited into the river. So with development also comes industry, and with industry there's also discharges into the waterways, into the wetlands, and of course with that makes it back into the river. So bringing harm to the river is bringing harm to the wildlife that depend on the river, and as far as that, it also impacts humans. But the first to feel it are the fish species, the aquatic species, and the wildlife that depend on that, because we know that all life depends on rivers. And our first frontline defenders, or the ones that are impacted, in the very front line of that, is your wildlife, because they're on the river, they're living in this habitat. So I think it's our responsibility to make sure that these living beings, that we respect their habitat, we respect their home. And I certainly wouldn't walk into your home or anybody's home and disrespect it in that way, or do things that would bring it harm. So I hope that that's what people will hear, that we need to continue to ensure that the areas that are under conservation remain that way. And certainly there are threats to that. And that we also ensure that processes are developed, plans are looked at, so that we can continue to address any of the water quality issues that exist on the river today.
Memories in my mind. When I think about the Little PeeDee River, I think about home. Because as Trapper, as you know, I grew up on the Little PeeDee River, and I have very, very few memories of from my youth that don't include the Little PeeDee River, whether it's fishing or swimming or boating or hunting. Oh my gosh, hunting.
Great
and just having a good time on the Little PeeDee River, and it's home to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I fight to protect it, and to make sure that I have a grandbaby on the way. Make sure my grandbaby and my grandbaby's grandbabies can always enjoy that beautiful river. I mean, that beautiful tea-colored, as Cheryl was saying a while ago, tea-colored water. It needs to be protected. It deserves to be protected. But I have a lot of memories. Papa would always say after we'd feed our animals, they call me Bee, and they say, Bee, go from Flat Bay and dig some worms and let's go fishing. Man, that was the best thing in the world. Papa say, Bee, let's go fishing. And we'd load the boat up and we'd go fishing. And I remember one time he told me, you can't catch fish out in the middle of the river, because I would drive the trolling motor, and I'd have us out in the middle of the river. And I said, you watch this, Pa. And I threw out one time, I remember, got me a big old bass out in the middle of the river. Who would have thought that, But it's things like that that I want other people to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to protect it. And as much as I love the river, as much as we love that beautiful water, you know, it flooded my parents' house twice during Hurricane Matthew in Florence. So as much as we love that water, it was very destructive and took my parents home 2 times. And, you know, they're proposing to have I-73 come right down the middle of Little PeeDee River.
Right.
And as we know that whenever you got an interstate and all that infrastructure coming, all these communities on each side of that river have flooded twice now. I mean, Mom and Daddy lived where they lived for 50 years, never had water in the yard. And then they flooded twice. And we know with that type of infrastructure, we have the wetland degradation, we have the deforestation. Without those wetlands, without that forest to suck up that water, it's going to cause more flooding. So I'm really afraid that these communities downstream and upstream of this proposed interstate is really going to, you know, make the flooding even worse for all these communities along the river. And like Cheryl was saying, people have been living on this river for hundreds of years, you know, and that's what we're drawn to the river.
Yeah.
You know, all the recreational activities, like Dylan was saying, we're drawn to this river, and that's why we build our homes near the river. And we know we have climate change, but I see this interstate coming in, and I just see it destroying wetlands. I just see wildlife fragmentation. I see even hunting.
Yeah.
You know,
noise pollution associated with a big road like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
How does that impact hunting and wildlife?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we got the water quality, as Dylan was talking about. And, you know, you got all that infrastructure coming, and with that infrastructure might come more development. And I feel like it's really going to make the flooding worse, make the water quality worse. And we've got to fight and do what we can to protect it, because it's amazing. You can just see how pretty it is.
Yeah, and I grew up in Horry County, and more of a Waccamaw River guy growing up. But you know, Dylan spoke about the confluence of the PeeDee and the Little PeeDee, and once I saw that kind of, you know, maybe a little changed my heart a little bit about Little PeeDee and how special it was. And then, of course, you know, more recently as a wildlife biologist, I managed that stretch for the state of South Carolina, the Little PeeDee Heritage Preserve, which is right where I-73 is proposed to come through. Yeah. This is a rapidly growing area of the country, and we do need infrastructure to support the growth, but we don't need to destroy our existing conservation lands that were set aside to be protected in perpetuity so folks can enjoy it, you know, not just our kids, but their grandkids and future generations. We got to hold on to these things. And like you said, you know, these wetlands that are protected, they in turn protect us, you know, through free ecosystem services, whether that be, you know, protections through erosion or filtration of pollutants that are associated with things like roads. We can't drive roads through our existing conservation lands. That totally defeats the purpose of setting those aside. In Horry County and on the, you know, Marion County line, you know, you got I-73 proposed, which is an interstate, but then, you know, right here that will parallel PeeDee Highway is the Highway 22 extension, the western part of that road. And that'll indirectly impact this river. And like you said, I-73 will drive right through the middle of it. And, you know, if you live in Horry County, right now is a really good time to act. That there's a whole list of roads, and a lot of those projects are needed and desired by the community. But the 2 most expensive road projects on that list are I-73 and the Highway 22 extension. So if you live in Horry County, you need to write your council member, you need to write your state legislator, and you need to ask them to remove those projects from that list. That way the other projects that are needed for the community, for our growing community, can move forward. But we cannot impact and devastate our conservation lands and devastate this river. And then, of course, if you don't live in Horry County and you're in South Carolina, you can still write your state legislator. You can still make phone calls. And then, of course, you can send letters of opposition to one of our organizations, and we can get it to the right place for you. But right now is a crucial time to be able to keep these two boondoggle road projects off this road project list, and it can't just be the conservation organizations calling for the removal and no funding going towards these projects. It's got to be the community. We are so much stronger when we all work together and we all speak up at the same time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, please ask for these I-73 and the Highway 22 extension to be removed from the project list here in Horry County. The time's now for that. And write your state officials and ask them to provide no funding for those road projects. These are projects that have been around for 20 or 30 years and they haven't happened for a reason. And it's because they're not needed. We need to put money towards our existing roads and improve those first. And then be really careful about where we plan new roads, and impacting and driving right through the heart of rivers like this, the little PeeDee, are not the place.